Okay, so today we are basically going to be covering the last spread of chapter 4. So chapter 4 was a really long chapter, but finally we are at the end of it. So 4.9 is what we are doing today, and it's basically what we're going to be doing for this whole week. So we're not going to cover any new content after this. It's just finishing off the last spread. So 4.9 is called Enablers and Barriers to Healthy Eating in terms of social, cultural, and political factors. Okay, so what we're really looking at in today's content is what are the factors from a social, cultural, and political point of view that either enable or allow a person to eat healthy, or that prevent or block or act as a barrier to healthy eating for a lot of people. Okay, so we're just going to look at a few different factors today. And a lot of this stuff we have covered actually earlier in the chapter. A lot of it is pretty common sense, it's pretty general knowledge, but there are some things that are important, like certain examples. So I'll point out to those as we go through the slides. So looking at the first slide here, and I probably need to mention that this PowerPoint has actually been, or this spread has been updated from the previous PowerPoint you probably got in class. So you can go and download the updated version of this after the Zoom session. Okay, because I have added a bit more information in here, so it's a bit clear. So anyway, food selection is influence. So the kind of food that you eat, the kind of food that you choose to eat or you select, it's not just your choice. Sometimes you're like, yep, I'm making a decision here. I'm in control. But actually there are a wide range of factors that actually influence what kind of foods you choose to eat, okay? Some really, without categorizing them, some really basic ones are price. Okay, if there's a really expensive meal, you're probably going to be less likely to buy that. Even if you probably want to eat it, if there's a meal that's kind of similar but for half the price, you might buy that. Okay. Family and friends. Obviously, when you're with your family, there are certain foods that you can or can't eat. Okay. When you're with your friends, there are certain foods you might be eating more of, like certain junk foods. Okay. The food preparation setting. So when we talked about housing as a sociocultural factor, remember we talked about the fact that if you live in a house with a really shoddy kitchen where you can't even cook food properly and there's no space and it's always messy, you're not going to want to cook healthy food from home. You're always going to want to get Menulog or Uber Eats or some kind of food delivery option there or takeaway. Access and equity. So we know that not everyone has the same level of access and that this can be influenced by income, okay? And again, income is connected to price. So that's where all these arrows come in, kind of linking the different concepts and the different factors, okay? So let's go into a little bit more depth about what this spread will be covering. So basically, we know that obviously when we make choices about food, we don't just make choices in a vacuum. We don't just make choices by ourselves. There are factors that, whether we know it or not, unconsciously or consciously, those factors can actually influence the kind of foods we choose to eat. Okay, and that's what we say when we talk about food selection or food choices. It's the foods that we decide to eat or decide to consume. So today we're going to be dividing this PowerPoint into looking at the social factors, the cultural factors, and the political factors, okay? We need to remember that neither one of these three factors is more important than the other. They're all important and they all interact, okay, to either allow us to eat healthy, which we call as enablers, or that stop us from eating healthy, that which we call barriers, okay? So in this PowerPoint, if a factor allows you or promotes you or encourages you to eat healthy, that we call that factor an enabler. And if it blocks you or prevents you from making a healthy food choice, we call that a barrier. The reason I'm really focusing on these words is that these words are used in the study design. And if we ask you a question in SAC or exam situation, such as describe one factor that acts as an enabler for healthy eating, you should know what the word enabler means. Okay, if you know what the word enable means, it's really common sense. But again, just to be clear, that you need to be familiar with the word enabler and with the word barrier and what that means. Okay, so the first thing we're looking at is social factors, okay? So social factors are talking about family. We're talking about the role of friends in influencing your food selection. We're talking about the role of socioeconomic status. So we've learned about this term a lot. We've talking about, you know, education, income, occupation, and the role that these three things have on our food selection. And the last thing, which we also learned about in 4.7 and 4.8, is the role of social media. So how does social media play a role in giving us nutrition information or in encouraging us to make certain food choices compared to others? Okay, so those are the four factors that come under social factors. So obviously, social factors are important to examine when we look at food selection and food choices, because especially today with all this food culture, with all this, this whole foodie culture and this whole kind of taking photos of your food for Instagram, or, meeting up with a friend, a lot of the time, and I think they did like some survey where they were actually like trying to gather research into what people do for social activities most of the time. And it was found that most people actually ate as a social activity. So if you're trying to meet up with a friend, it's like, okay, let's go for coffee, let's go for brunch, let's go for, I don't know, churros or something like that. So eating is considered a social activity. And so we have to examine these four social factors now that actually influence those food choices. So the first one is family. Okay, so family is really an important social factor. Number one, most of us will spend most of our time with our family when it comes to dinner time or dinner meals. You can't be going out every meal of the day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, to eat outside or eat with your friends. Your family will probably disown you. Okay, that's the truth of it. So a lot of the time we are eating with our family. We might not necessarily all be eating like at a dinner table all at the same time. In most families they do that, but we're not saying that that's what family is about. We're saying that family influences your food selection because a lot of the time you will eat what your mum or your dad cooks up for you, okay? And a lot of the time, especially with Muslim parents, you can't really make demands like, actually, today I'm feeling like vegetarian. Can you make me a separate meal? Your mum will probably throw a shoe at you or something. Okay, it's not going to work. So a lot of the time you are going to eat what your mum or your dad or whatever guardian you have is going to cook for you. Okay, so if your parents are always cooking meals like with rice, with pasta, like pretty carb heavy meals, you're going to eat that and you're not really going to have another choice unless you know how to cook yourself and you're happy to take the time to cook your own meals. Now, a lot of the time family is important because they can either act as an enabler by promoting the consumption of healthy food, or they can act as a barrier. So if your parents, or if someone's parents are basically always ordering takeout, they're always cooking meals that are quite high in fat or quite high in carbs and with very little nutrients like fruits and vegetables or whatever, that can actually mean that your family acts as a barrier to you eating healthy food, okay? Or they can act as an enabler. So if you're like, Mom, I want a snack, and your mom, instead of giving you a packet of chips or a chocolate bar, she gives you like some fruit, or she gives you like some carrots and some crackers with dip. That's kind of like a healthier choice. And in doing that, your family can either act as an enabler or act as a barrier, okay? So it really depends on what kind of food patterns your family is having and how that influences your own food patterns. The next thing is kind of similar, and we're talking about friends. Now, a lot of the time, especially as you get older, especially as you start to go out more with your friends, as you start to get into university and you're out most of the day and you're probably only with your family for dinner time or something, your friends or your peer group start to become a really important factor in influencing your food selection. And so a lot of the time when you go out with your friends, it's kind of difficult. It's not as extreme of an example as smoking or alcohol consumption when we're talking about peer pressure, but food selection is actually something a lot of us just unconsciously do when we're with our friends. So if you go out with your friends and the majority of your friends group wants to get Macca's or wants to get KFC or wants to get Nando's or whatever, you're not going to want to stick out like a sore thumb. You're not going to want to be the person who says, actually, guys, I think we should have salad today. Or actually, guys, why don't we just have like, something healthier today? You're just going to want to accept that and kind of go with what the majority of the people want, okay? Also, teenagers, especially in that age group, are more likely to eat fast food with friends. So they are more likely to go to Macca's together. They're more likely to go through drive-through somewhere easy. A lot of drive-through outlets are fast food outlets like KFC and stuff, just getting something on the go on the way to where they're going, okay? So a lot of the time when we're talking about friends, and you might want to think about the questions of where do you typically eat when you go out with your friends, and do you choose healthy foods? And I'm pretty sure like most of you will come to this conclusion that you don't go to some salad bar when you're going out with your friends. You do tend to go to fast food outlets, or outlets that wouldn't necessarily be considered healthy, okay, or nutritious by any means. So again, your friends group can have an impact on your food selection. So even more of an extent than your family, because if your mum makes a salad, you're more likely to eat it. But in your friends group, especially because you're all the same age, it's a very low likelihood that someone's going to say, okay, let's go to a salad bar instead of going to Macca's. Okay, it's like, that's just how that age group works. So that's how friends can play a role in food selection. Then we look at socioeconomic status. So remember, socioeconomic status is made of three main indicators. First one being income, so how much money you earn or have, education, and occupation. So occupation is referring to what kind of job you have and what kind of employment or work environment you experience or you're working in. Okay, so the first thing is income. And we've talked about this before. We talk about the fact that fast food is so cheap. And for that reason, a lot of people who have lower income levels tend to go for fast food, okay? Remember I gave you guys the example ages ago where it's very easy for someone who's working like 2 jobs on the way home from one of those jobs. It's very easy for them to just go through Macca's drive-through and just get a family box for $20. And with $20, that's it, the job's done. It's easy. Their kids like it. It's easy for them. They don't have to do any preparation, nothing. It's just get the family box and go home, and that's dinner sorted. That's okay once in a while, but when it happens like 2, 3, 4 times a week, it becomes a problem because you're not really getting a lot of nutrition out of that, okay? There are obviously ways you can make a family box nutritious, like you can swap out the chips for a salad and you can swap out the Coke for water, but honestly, who's going to do that? Especially when you've got kids in the house and you just want them to have something they'll actually eat rather than throw in the bin. So family box is very cheap. Now, if you are going to make all these burgers, you're going to actually make some healthy potato wedges by hand. It is going to cost you a very big amount of money to do that, okay? And so this little picture here that says, don't ask why real food is so expensive, ask why junk food is so cheap. There's a reason why burgers and things are really cheap, okay? And it's because they're mass-produced items. They contain a lot of preservatives, which means that they can stay on the shelf for a longer life. And they're not really good for you to have frequently, okay? But for people with low income, sometimes they don't have an option. They can't go and buy like a nice, good quality steak for their kids to have good protein. They just got to stick with what's within their budget, okay? The next thing is education. Education is important, and we're not saying that you've got to have a PhD to understand how to make healthy food choices. What we're saying is having that understanding of health literacy, which is basic health knowledge, is important. And even by finishing up to year 10 health and PE, or even you guys are actually getting an upper hand doing health and human in BCE because now you're getting more knowledge on nutrition, okay? But even just having a basic school education gives you that kind of health literacy and that basic knowledge of nutrition, you know, your home economic, your food tech classes, your normal health and PE theory classes, all of those stuff you were doing from when you were in primary school to when you were in year 10 even, give you a lot of knowledge of what is healthy and what is not healthy, okay? People that don't have any level of education are less likely to eat healthier foods. They're less likely to understand the importance of fruits and vegetables for a healthy diet, for example. They might think that, yeah, fruits and vegetables are good, but, you know, what's so bad if I have a burger? They don't really understand the kind of details of why nutrition is important. And you'd find it hard to believe, but there are people who actually don't understand the link between nutrition and disease. So they don't think that eating Macca's frequently could possibly lead to a heart attack. They think heart attack is something that might be more genetic. But we know that certain diseases are influenced by, you know, nutrition, but influenced by the kind of food that you eat, okay? So education is very important in influencing your health, your food choices and whether those food choices are healthy and nutritious. And the last thing is occupation. So occupation is an important one. And it's especially important for, it doesn't, you know, when we talk about occupation, we're not just talking about the fact that you've got a job, okay? Occupation is basically what are you occupied with in life, okay? Now, if you're a student and, you know, when you guys go to university, inshallah, you'll realize this, a lot of the time you're super busy. You don't really have time to prepare healthy meals. So a lot of the time you'll be rushing out the door, trying to catch the train, trying to, make sure you get to your uni class on time, or, drive to uni or whatever. So you're really always working on the go. People who go to work in the city, who have to be stuck in traffic, they're always catching, they're always trying to get a coffee or a donut on the go. And you might have noticed there's a lot of these coffee places that pop up, and they're called coffee drive-through. So you don't even have to get out of your car. You just go through a drive-through and, you get a coffee. They're like, okay, would you like a banana bread? Would you like a donut with that? And you're like, yeah, you know what? Why the hell not? So then you just get a donut or a banana bread or some other sugary kind of snack. Now, a lot of the time, especially because whether you're a student or whether you're working full-time, you're always working on the go, you're always eating on the go, that can actually be a factor that actually acts as a barrier to healthy eating. No one has the ability to have a full salad or a nice little, veggie burger or chicken burger, something healthy, or a nice sandwich while they're driving a car. But it's very easy to just have a donut in one hand and drive a car, as you can see in this picture here, okay? So a lot of the time we are kind of opting for options where we can actually quickly eat something on the go, without having to have too much, salad dressing or like too much other stuff to deal with. Your employment conditions can also influence your food choices, okay? So a lot of people who work in places like Macca's or KFC, they might be more inclined to eat food from those outlets, or maybe after a while they get sick of it. But again, because they're in that environment, maybe they've got a staff discount to buy, from that particular outlet or from the place of their work, they might be more likely to purchase or make food choices through those fast food outlets, okay? So that's what basically occupation is, and how occupation can play a role in making you eat healthy or not eat healthy, okay? A lot of workplaces also have like snack bars, or they have like, cupboards where you open the cupboard and it's full of junk food, or someone brings in a cake every day or a box of donuts every day. That can also, obviously, if you're trying to eat healthy and stay on a strict diet and be a nutritious person, those things can actually tempt you and can make you want to give into those unhealthy eating habits. Okay. And the last social factor we're looking at is actually social media as a source of nutrition information. So you guys already know we've been looking at social media's role since 4.7, but the fact that you guys are always kind of on your phones, on some kind of device, whether it be a tablet, laptop, PC, whatever. So a lot of the time, the nutrition information that you get is not from dietitians, it's not from an actual nutritionist, it's more from social media or what you read online. And so we have to remember that in 4.7, we talked about the fact that not everything you read online is true. And it's always important to take that information with a grain of salt. So basically, take it in a very cautious way and don't believe every single thing you read. And we talked about in last time's PowerPoint for 4.8, we talked about the role of celebrity endorsements. And we talked about the fact that there are certain people on Instagram or YouTube who have quite a big kind of follow, and who have a lot of followers who look up to them and who admire them. And we call these people influencers, okay? Because they influence basically the decisions of these followers. Now, if you're following an influencer or a celebrity on YouTube or on Instagram or Facebook or whatever, and they're promoting a certain food or drink or snack product, you have to remember that they might not necessarily have that every day in their own life. They've probably just been paid to promote that product. And so even though they talk about how healthy it is, we actually don't have a real idea of whether they're consuming that product every day. And they do have this kind of hidden agenda that they're using to promote that particular product. So one example, which I just found online, was this concept of fit tea. So fit tea is something that's really hit it off in the US. Fit tea is a type of tea that you drink, and apparently it helps you to feel more physically energetic. Apparently it helps you to lose weight and get rid of bloating and all this stuff. And there's like so many celebrities who have like endorsed this particular tea product. Okay, so a lot of these celebrities might not necessarily drink the tea product themselves, but when they advertise it, they might act like they do. And so this kind of encourages their followers to be like, oh my God, if Khloe Kardashian is drinking fit tea, then I have to drink it too. Like, and it's so accessible. Like, I could be buying a product that a celebrity drinks. Like, wow, I don't know. Okay, people are really weird. So basically, that's one example. Okay, like we talked about last time, it's even though Kendall Jenner promotes Pepsi, doesn't mean that Pepsi is her drink of choice every day. You know, you can't be a model and be drinking Pepsi every day. It doesn't make sense. So although we can critically evaluate those sources of nutrition information, we have to remember that young people, especially 12-year-olds, don't understand that, okay? On Instagram, you also have to remember that although a page looks like a nutrition page, it doesn't mean it's being run by an actual nutrition or an actual dietitian, okay? So whenever you read information on those pages, for example, this little Instagram cutout I've taken here, we're not trying to criticize this person's page, but the person who owns this page is a vegetarian or a vegan. So a lot of the food pictures they post up of healthy foods that they eat will be vegetarian or vegan. If you're a person who's not vegetarian or vegan, but you're just following their page, you might be losing out on important sources of iron and protein because you just want to follow all the recipes that this woman posts on her Instagram, okay? So you have to remember that you always have to look at the background information of any nutrition source you read on social media. Okay, now we're looking at cultural factors. So cultural factors will probably be a little bit more relatable for a lot of us because, again, they're directly related to the kinds of social and cultural environments that we are in and that we experience. Okay, the three cultural factors we're going to be focusing on, religion, ethnicity, and gender. Okay, so that's basically the three different factors we're looking at today. So the first, I've just put them into one slide here. So religion is obviously talking about, you know, what religious group you identify with or what religion you've come from, okay? So obviously, we know that depending on what religious group you identify with, there are certain foods you might not be able to eat. For example, Hindus, because obviously cows are kind of sacred to them, they generally don't eat beef. We know with Muslims, they generally don't eat, you know, Muslims obviously don't eat pork and we don't consume alcohol. Jews also have this kind of thing similar to this concept of halal. They have something called kosher, and kosher means that there are certain foods that they can't eat as well. Okay, so obviously, religion does play a big role in the kinds of foods that we can and can't eat. In a way, certain things like not being able to eat alcohol, not being able to drink alcohol is actually good for our health and actually promotes us to make healthier food choices, okay? So we have to remember that there are food selections, that our food selections can actually be influenced by the religious group that we identify with. The next thing we're looking at is ethnicity. So ethnicity is your ethnic background, or in other words, your cultural background that you identify with. Now we know that different ethnic groups do have different foods. So some ethnic groups eat more like rice. Some ethnic groups eat more meat or bread, for example. Certain ethnic groups have more consumption of chili and herbs and spices, whereas, you know, certain ethnic groups don't. So obviously, when we're talking about ethnicity, it's about the fact that depending on what environment you grow up in and what ethnicity, what ethnic background you kind of grow up with, the foods that you eat will be influenced by that. So obviously, you know, my ethnic background growing up, like we used to eat a lot of rice, still do. So obviously rice is good for you, but then like, you know, with Sri Lankans, they go overboard with the rice. It's like, that's way more than the serving size. So it's like, you know, yeah, depending on what environment you come from, the kinds of foods that you eat, you might be over consuming certain nutrients or under consuming certain nutrients. So again, if you come from an ethnic background where you're eating quite a lot of meat, you might be over consuming protein more than you require, okay? If you come from a background where you're eating a lot of chili, that might actually be good for you because your metabolism is always kind of active, okay, from all the chili and from the herbs and spices. And we know that herbs and spices have their own nutrient profile as well. Okay, so that's to do with ethnicity. The last thing is a really interesting one, and we've talked about the role of gender when we did sociocultural factors, but gender actually has an influence on your food intake as well. So research has shown that males actually consume less fruits and vegetables, and overall have less nutritious and healthy food intakes compared to females. So there are a lot of factors for this. So number one, males might not make, in a lot of cultures, males are still kind of the main breadwinner for the family or the main person who works, even today. So for some males, they might not have time to stay at home and prepare healthy foods, or they might just take to work whatever their wives make them. Like, you know, some people still work in that kind of dynamic. Cost. So obviously sometimes, especially when you're a male and you're working for your family, you might be putting your needs kind of in the back seat, and you might be kind of prioritizing your family. So if you could buy like a $3 burger or a $7 salad, you might be more likely to buy the $3 burger and save the $4 to buy, I don't know, like a cake for your kids or something. Lack of cooking skills, obviously, in a lot of cultures, even today, like males tend to lack cooking skills, or they might not value that as being an important thing they have to learn to do. And also males tend to, because we talked about this thing, I don't know if you guys remember, we talked about this concept that males tend to be less obsessed with this whole diet culture. Okay, males tend to have less pressures to look a certain way than females. We're not saying they don't have pressures, but less, okay? So that's one reason why females actually tend to have a better understanding of healthy eating behaviors, and females tend to be more concerned about what they're eating. They're quite like diet conscious, and they're more focused on like making sure that, you know, they can eat healthier foods. Okay, this might be changing. Obviously, more males are getting into like certain diets like keto, for example, but like to what extent is keto really an example of a healthy, balanced diet? Okay, probably not the best example there. Okay, so that's the role of gender in influencing food selection. And gender is another example of a cultural factor. Okay, when we talk about culture, remember, it's not just about religion and ethnicity, but even the society or the culture of the society in which you grow up, and gender kind of falls into that. Okay, and the last factors that we're going to look at are political factors. So in political factors, we're looking at food policies and laws, we're looking at food labeling, and we're looking at how health promotion influence our food selection. So food policies and law is basically talking about this concept that the government can actually make certain policies or laws or taxes to make junk food or fast food more expensive. But the question is, how willing are governments to do this? Now, you have to remember that from a political point of view or a government point of view, fast food outlets are really good at generating a lot of money for the economy, okay? Think about this. When you go to a new country, do you go straight away and eat at some local food place, or do you go to the nearest thing that you recognize and that you're familiar with? A lot of us will try to look for the nearest KFC or Macca's because we know what those places sell. We know that those places will be okay to eat at because we're already familiarized with those places. So we tend to look for what's familiar. A lot of the time when tourists come here as well, you'd realize that a lot of them actually go to Macca's or to KFC. Even though Macca's and KFC are probably in their own home countries as well, they will tend to stick to what they know before exploring and venturing the local cuisine. Like even when I went to Sydney last year, and I went to Macca's, I think, to get like a Coke or something. And there were like so many tourists. Like that was obviously the Macca's that was in this kind of, in the middle, kind of near the Circular Quay and stuff. But like, there were so many tourists in there. And I was just thinking like, Macca's is probably in their own countries as well, but they still choose to get their food or get their drink or get an ice cream from Macca's because that's what they know. Okay, so the government actually gets a lot of money from Macca's, from KFC, from all these fast food outlets around Australia because they generate a lot of revenue compared to a small burger shop that might be on the corner of your street. Okay, now this is one of the reasons why the government can put a tax on junk food and fast food, but they are very hesitant to do so because if they make junk food more expensive, or they put a tax on junk food and fast food, less people are going to buy it and there's going to be lower consumption. less people buying junk food or fast food means less money that's going back to our economy or back to the government, okay? So obviously, some countries have implemented a food tax, so making like a can of Coke or a bottle of Coke more expensive, to decrease that consumption or the purchasing of those sugary kind of drinks. But Australia is still kind of in the starting stages of that, okay? So they're still kind of less hesitant, less willing to kind of get into that. If you look at the picture here, again, this might be an example why Macca's can afford to give you a burger, like a hamburger for, I don't know, $1 or $2, but buying a salad from like a salad bar, like a basic salad, will cost you like $5. And again, this is connected to that idea of income, okay? So food policies and laws and what the government decides to do with food policy related to junk food and fast food can have a really big influence on food selection. So then we look at food labeling. So we've already looked at food labeling. Remember, we did the activity in class where we were analyzing the labels and the nutritional panels on food. It's really important that a customer or a consumer knows what they're buying when they buy a product. You can't just buy a bag of rice. Even though you know it's rice in there, you've got to have the details, okay? You've got to have the use by date. You've got to have the nutritional panel. Okay, you've got to have the barcode. You've got to have where the product was made or where the ingredients are coming from. For products that are made in Australia and for companies that actually pay for the health star rating, the health star rating might actually be displayed on the product as well. Okay, the use by date has to be on the product. Okay, obviously when you go to buy milk, you'd notice that, what's it called? Milk always has a use by date, because if you drink milk after the use by date, might not necessarily be the best thing for your health. You could get food poisoning, you could get like, I don't know, stomach cramps or diarrhea or something, okay? So obviously food labeling is very important, and we are very likely to buy food that has proper labeling on it compared to some dodgy looking bag of chips that doesn't have any labeling on it and just looks like it came out of nowhere, okay? So food labeling plays an important role in us purchasing and selecting certain food products, okay? And also, when you think about chocolate bars, when you think about especially lollies and chocolates and biscuits that are usually aimed at kids, you'll notice that the actual packaging or the labeling that they use, the colors of the packaging, are really attractive, okay? If you look at a Cadbury bar or a block of chocolate, it's this beautiful purple color. It automatically attracts the eyes and the attention of a little kid, okay? If you look at if you look at Ellen's lollies, for example, it's like a red bag, okay? It's so like noticeable, okay, in a store compared to other products. So again, you have to remember that food labeling does play a role in what kind of foods we select and choose to buy. And the last thing we're looking at today, and this will finish off the content for this week, is health promotion. Now, health promotion is something you are going to do a lot more in the later part of Unit 3, when if you decide to do health next year in Year 12, okay? So health promotion is basically talking about the fact that governments always try to promote health. What do we mean by promote health? Basically looking at this idea that they want to increase the health and well-being of people who live in their countries or in their states or societies. And so health promotion basically means that you want to show people the link between nutrition and the link between health. Okay, now we've already learned about dietary guidelines and the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating. That was the pie chart model that we looked at earlier in chapter 4. It's important for those kinds of models to be clearly put up in schools, to be put up in community centres, to be put up in medical centres, so people have this understanding. And remember, one of the best things about the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating that we both discussed is, number one, it's so colourful. Number two, there's not a lot of words on it. It's just pictures of the food. And number three, it's pictures of the food that are actually like real pictures. So when you go to the shops and you've got the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating in your hand or on your phone, you can actually match what's on the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating with the product you're buying in store, because they look the same. Okay, so obviously when we're talking about health promotion programs, it's the government's way of saying, okay, here's a diagram for you. Here's a food selection model for you. This has all the information you need, okay? The big part of the pie graph is everything you should be eating in big amounts, like fruits and vegetables. The small part of the pie graph, or the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating, is looking at foods or drinks or snacks you should be eating in low amounts. So butter, chips, lollies, chocolates, all that stuff. So it's very easy then for people to make the link between healthy lifestyle and nutrition. And they should often be able to make healthier food choices using these food selection model. So in very simple terms, health promotion is enabled by the government through them publishing food selection models like the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating or the Healthy Eating Pyramid, or this photo here. So this photo is basically taken from a health promotion initiative or program that they actually developed in Western Australia. And they actually wanted to be really upfront with this. So what they did was they wanted to show a picture of, what toxic fat looks like in the body. So when you look at this, you get this really disgusting reaction when you look at this second picture here, like, ew, what is that? And then when you finally get to know that this is what toxic fat looks like in the body of someone who's overweight, and they show you an actual picture of, someone who's overweight, you kind of want to get away from this. So if you are overweight, you decide, no, things have got to change. I've got to change my lifestyle. I can't be like this. If this is what I look like on the inside, I've got to change my lifestyle. I've got to make healthier food choices. Okay. So sometimes health promotion can involve shocking people. Okay. Like you saw with those WorkSafe ads we watched earlier in the term. Sometimes you do have to shock people so that they are moved enough to actually make that change for themselves in their real life. Okay, so that basically concludes 4.9 for us. Now, just before you go, I just want you to have a quick look at this slide here. And this slide is basically for you guys to get a clear idea of what you need to be doing for the rest of the week. So if you look at, and I'm not sure how many of you know how to access this, but if you go to your class page, you realize that there are 3 tiles that you can actually access. And those 3 tiles are basically looking at the weeks, okay? What you have to do in each week. So you got week 1 tasks, week 2 tasks, and week 3 tasks. Now, for this week's things that you need to be doing, you're actually going to be accessing the second tile. So you go into your class page, and the tile that's got the fruit and vegetables dancing or whatever on it, you click that. When you click that, this page will open up, okay? So when you click that, this page will open up, and it'll tell you what you need to be doing this week for first online session, second online, third online. Now, first online, we've already done the first bit. So we've done 4.9 together, so you can skip task number 1. What you're going to be doing now for the rest of the period, because obviously you guys have your offline session now. So for the rest of your offline session, I want you to watch the 2 YouTube videos that are on that page. So you click into the term 2 week 2 tile, and there'll be 2 videos. One will be a cartoony kind of video, and the other one will be 2 ladies kind of talking. So I want you to click on those and watch those 2 YouTube videos. And afterwards, I want you to also watch the Edrollo summary video for this topic. Okay, so you can click on that link and then log into your Edrollo account and watch that. So that's all you've really got to do for today. In the second online session when do we have the second online? Is it Friday? I think we've got it on Friday. Yeah. In the second online session, what you need to be doing is you need to be listening to the Zoom content lecture. So after this lecture, after I stop the recording at the end of this, I will be posting this to the recording drive, okay? I've put a link up on the files that says HHD Zoom recordings drive link or whatever. And everything, all the recordings that we have for these online sessions will be on that particular drive. So you can go in and download that and re-listen to that. Or some of you who have been having a bit of Zoom issues, you can go in and listen to that afterwards, okay? Now, the main work you need to submit for this week is 4.9 questions. And you'll know what questions to do from your homework checklist. It's also under files if you don't have the hard copy. So 4.9 questions and exam preparation questions 1 and 2. So now that we finished chapter 4, you go to the end of chapter 4, and under the, before the next chapter starts, you'll have exam preparation questions. So you're going to do those, and you are going to submit those 2 activities by the end of this week, okay? Before next week begins, I need to see both of those 2 activities or work in the file Dropbox, okay? If you're having issues with the file Dropbox, just email them directly to me. Okay, so that's basically it for today. So I'm going to stop the recording here.